Hey there, welcome to another episode of Cartridges and Casings. I'm your host, Revere 311, and today is a very exciting day. I have on a very famous person, one of the most famous people I've had on there, Mr. Ed. Ed Darack is a photographer, combat correspondent, and an author that has written extensively about the Marine Corps and other topics. So first, Ed, if you would like to introduce yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Luke. I mean, we met in Marja, Afghanistan in February of 2011, and that was the last conversation we've had. We haven't spoken in 15 years, so it's nice to talk to you again.
Well, the funny thing is actually when I was joining the Marine Corps, your book, Victory Point, was on my recruiter's desk because he was in 2-3 during that deployment. Staff Sergeant Klingingsmith. I'm gonna have to send this to him.
I've heard the name, yeah.
And so that is actually what this picture is taken from. And I think it's kind of interesting that most people don't know that the Marine Corps actually went to the mountains of Afghanistan. For those that are really tied into, Marine Corps, GWAT war, Afghanistan history, it's mostly a Helmand operation down there in the floodplains and stuff like that. But yeah, tell me about this photo. What are we looking at? And we'll just start there then.
Yeah, that's the Pesh River Valley. It was Operation PIL, PIL, which was Dari for elephant. And that 0331 is Michael Scholl. He was tragically killed in 2006 in the Anbar province of Iraq. And this was, when I showed up to Afghanistan, this was taken in October of 2005. I showed up early October to Camp Blessing, and I accompanied 1st Platoon, Echo Company, 2nd Battalion, 3rd Marine Regiment, so Echo 1, and Mike was the machine gunner attached to that platoon. So this is a photograph I took of him at dawn. The Marines and attached ANA, Afghan National Army soldiers, had started out at Waterpore Village and ascended the side of a hill and side of a mountain. And this was right at sunrise. So it was just the right place at the right time and got this shot of him. So, but that was my first combat embed. And that was still to this, that was the groundwork for me to write the book Victory Point, which was about Operation Red Wings and then Operation Whalers, which was the operation that the Marine Corps conducted following Operation Red Wings. And where this photograph was taken was right in that vicinity where both those operations had taken place.
Okay, and then for people probably have heard of Operation Red Wings, and unfortunately not so much of Whalers. Maybe since you've written a book, you've been able to bring attention to it. But
right.
Honestly, if you just want to kind of give the rundown of Red Wings and what people would probably recognize it from, and I guess, how you, just that.
Well, Operation Red Wings was a joint operation between, was originally planned to be primarily the Marine Corps. The Marine Corps wanted certain type of aviation support that was provided by the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment, which was a special operations owned asset in Afghanistan. Actually, it was owned by JSOC, Joint Special Operations Command. And the way the operation evolved, the Navy SEALs ended up being the supported element for phases 0 and 1 and 2. So the initial insert took place late in the night, or in the night of 27 June 2005. And then 28 June 2005, there was an ambush. The initial insert team was a special reconnaissance team for Navy SEALs, and they were ambushed by Ahmad Shah, who was the cell Ahmad Shah was the leader of a small cell in the area that, anti-coalition militia cell. He was aligned with Gulbuddin Hekmatyar, which is one of the people in Pakistan who was promoting, anti-coalition activities in the run-up to the parliamentary elections that were scheduled for September of 2005. But the four-man Navy SEAL team was ambushed by Shah and his men, and there was about 7 to 8 people in Shah's group, including him, and they had PK medium machine guns and RPGs, and they basically overwhelmed the SEALs, forced them down to the northeast gulch of the mountain called Satalo Sar on the Shuriak Valley side, and killed 3 of the 4. And the only survivor, Marcus Luttrell, a lot of people know about because of the book Lone Survivor, and then the subsequent movie that came out, I believe in 2014. So, but the book I wrote about, which was called Victory Point, which you had mentioned previously, that book came out in April of 2009, and it covered Red Wings and it covered Whalers, which was the subsequent operation. So the Marine Corps developed Whalers, and it kicked off in about mid-August, and they went up against Ahmad Shah and they chased him out of Afghanistan and into Pakistan. So it was a victory for the Marine Corps, and Ahmad Shah was eventually killed in Pakistan in, I believe it was 2008. So, and that was.
And was I was gonna ask, was there a Operation Red Wings 2, or am I misremembering something?
Well,
was basically
Red Wings 2 was the name that the Marines used, and that was, and some of the other elements who were involved in that overall initiative, that was the recovery. So as soon as, what happened, I didn't finish the full story. They ambushed the 4-man special reconnaissance team, and then a helicopter flew in with 8 Navy, or the 2 helicopters actually, for an ad hoc QRF, and then one of Shah's men shot the helicopter, the call sign Turbine 33, out of the sky. And so at that point, it became Operation Red Wings 2, recovery, search, and, at the exact point, they didn't know who was alive, who wasn't, but it was a search and recovery operation, potentially search and rescue. Actually, search, rescue, and recovery operation, really, if you want to be precise about it, because they they recovered Marcus Luttrell, and they recovered the bodies of those who were killed by Ahmad Shah, and who were during the initial ambush, and also the helicopter shoot down.
And you had mentioned this was your first embed, and
Right.
I think that'd be a great point to start. Your great point to start is, how do you get embedded with the Marine Corps unit, or just in regular combat unit? And do you have any connection to the Marine Corps or the military in general beforehand? Or I'd just love to know. You hiked some long mountain range, and you did
Right.
all sorts of stuff before you came over.
Yeah, I came to this from a mountaineering background, and I really was interested in embedding at the Marine Corps Mountain Warfare Training Center, which is outside of Colville and Bridgeport, California. And it was established in 1951 during the Korean War, and that was to prepare Marines going into the Korean War for the mountains in the cold weather. It was actually called the Cold Weather Battalion. So it was an adjunct to Camp Pendleton, basically. And through the years, interest in that base waxed and waned, and then it became very busy after 9/11 with the rotations of American forces into Afghanistan. So in March of 2005, I had the opportunity to go visit Mountain Warfare Training Center for 2 weeks. And how I got that opportunity was a friend of mine named Rick, who was a Marine who I knew from college. I emailed him and we talked, and he said, well, I'll see, if I can, what you got to, he helped me to get the connections of the people to talk to. And then I went on my own, and they said, okay, sure. You come on out, spend 2 weeks. And I did a project for Gannett newspapers, actually on my time there as an independent. And I was living at the time in Colorado. And so when I went out there, I spent time with different things that were going on. There was the high altitude operational evaluation portion of the MV-22B Osprey, and so I photographed that. There was a mountain medicine course that was going on. The base has personnel there. They're mountain leader personnel, and they have different courses, but then that people go to just for these courses, and also they've got they're a facility that they support units moving through. So I did both. I visited both. And one of the unit that was there training, or their pre-deployment training, was 2nd Battalion, 3rd Marines, and they were getting ready to relieve and place their sister battalion, 3rd Battalion, 3rd Marines. 3-3 had, in 2004, actually earlier than that, been scheduled to go be the battalion landing team of 31st MEU. And then I think it was around August, they decided that they were going to start sending Marine battalions into the Joint Task Force in place in Afghanistan. That was at the time it was CJTF 180, Combined Joint Task Force 180, and then it switched over to CJTF 76. And then below that was Task Force Devil. I believe that was I don't know Army units that well, the 504th Parachute Parachute Infantry Regiment, and that was Colonel Donahue. And so, it was Colonel Donahue when 2-3 came in. But anyway, so the plan was to rotate the 3rd Marine Regiment, the 3 battalions of the regiment, through RC East, Regional Command East, in Afghanistan. So that was going to be 3-3, 2-3, and then 1-3. And there were approximately 6-month rotations each. So initially, 3-3 was going to go on a MEU as a battalion landing team. That got changed, and so they did a very quick, the whole outlook changed, and they had exceptional leadership. Norm Cooling and Andrew Pretty, who was the operations officer for 3-3 at the time. And so they stood up and they got out there, and they had a really exceptional deployment. They began to, they had an operational cycle that was about one pretty large scale operation a month. One of the issues that they ran into earlier on, basically late 04, early 05, was they needed to deconflict their efforts with Naval Special Operations Forces operating in the same area. So instead of deconflicting, they worked with the Combined Joint Special Operations Task Force, Afghanistan, CJ SOTF A, CJ SOTF Alpha, and they developed a model basically where they were sharing intel with the SEALs, and it's basically a shared effort. So it was much more integrated, much less need for deconfliction, and it was very successful. They undertook several operations, Celtics, Spurs, Operation Mavericks. These were all named after sports teams, and then they began to develop an operational model called STARS, after the STARS is a hockey team. It's Dallas hockey team, I believe. And so just prior to that, they had gotten basically a high value target in the Korangal Valley, Najmuddin. And so they got him to surrender, and STARS was, just going to be another operation when they were going to go in and further provide stability for the region. And if there was any ACM activity, anti-coalition militia activity, they were going to quell that. And their this was a time when they were getting ready to be relieved in place by 2-3. And so the operation, the shell of the operation was handed over to 2-3. And as 2-3 was preparing their main element was preparing to go to Afghanistan. I think most people probably realize this who are interested in Marine Corps operations. You have ADVON, Advanced Echelon. They come first, and they're there for about, I think, 30 days prior to the main element. So, and then 3-3 is getting ready to leave. So during this turnover phase, 2-3 started developing intelligence on Ahmad Shah, and special operations in the area had also known about him. But so that's how the model began. It was initially STARS, and then the Second Battalion, 3rd Marines took that over as the shell of the operation, and they developed it into Red Wings, named after the Detroit Red Wings hockey team. So, they had basketball teams from Texas, and then they had a hockey team from Texas, and then they had a hockey team that was not from Texas. It was from Detroit. So that naming convention. But anyway, so subsequent to Red Wings, after that terrible tragedy, Operation 2-3 developed Operation Whalers, and so that was it was a primarily Marine Corps operation, but they were supported with conventional Army and conventional Air Force capabilities. For instance, the artillery that was based at Fob Wright. They had at the time there, they had 2 105s, 2-gun battery there, and then Air Force A-10s. They had a lot of Army aviation, some really wonderful pilots and crew of A-64 Apaches. They had UH-60s, Blackhawks that were provided to. They didn't give them the helicopters. They provided the units to them for their use. They medevac, which they needed, dust off. So it was a really great operation. It was very well done, and it was a pleasure to be able to learn about it and write about it. It just really went well. It was a classic Marine Corps infantry operation. They had phase lines. They had they basically was movement to contact along 4 Chowkay, Shuriak, Korangal, and then Narang. 4 valleys that they had planned on basically pushing Ahmad Shah's little army. They call it movement to contact, and they did contact him. They felt they were going to take contact in the Korangal Valley, but he moved over the summit of Satalasar into the Chowkay Valley, where Fox Company took several troops in contact incidents, and they blew them away. The good guys won. So, and that's what the book's about. So, what am I missing?
Yeah.
Did I hit all the points?
Well, I think it's kind of, well, you're the one that wrote the book. No, I find it, you talk about the aviation points, but it's kind of important to note that the Marine Corps doesn't have organic, aviation at the battalion level. So they're having to rely on other, and you've made it pretty, I remember reading your book about seeing how, like you just mentioned, Army, right. Air Force, Marine Corps. So, and the scale of this operation. Yeah.
Well, I should have touched on that. The Marine Corps is a fully encapsulated tactical fighting force. As you know, they have their own Air Force, the wing, they've got artillery, they did have tanks. They are integrated with the Navy quite well, so they can go anywhere in the world. And, the MAGTF, the Marine Air Ground Task Force, which is their organic multi-domain combined arms construct, and it works very well. And they, because everybody trains together like at 29 Palms during live fire, even before, deployment or pre-deployment workup, there a lot of, the JTACs, the Joint Terminal Attack Controllers, Forward Air Controllers, all, people throughout infantry will know the different elements like the JTACs, they'll know the people the term FIST, Fire Support Team. I don't know. It's been several years since I spent time at 29 Palms and was involved in studying this stuff in detail. But they've got the FIST, the FSCC, the Fire Support Coordination Center. It's at different levels, but the Marine Corps does have all that stuff. They don't have organic medevac. They can do organic CASEVAC. The medevac, of course, is a little bit different, a little bit more robust capability. But 2-3 did not deploy as a MU, which is a battalion level MAGTAF. They deployed as a battalion, I don't think I should use the term naked battalion, but they deployed as a battalion into a joint task force, into an in-place joint task force. And so that was actually one of the issues that they really had to face, because, they're used to having CH-53s, they're used to having Cobras and, UH-1s at the time. They wouldn't, that AO was too high for, at the time they were flying UH-1Ns, Novembers. They have Yankees now, which I think they have the performance for that density altitude. But, they, in 2005, 2-3, just like 3-3 before them and 1-3 after them, they were in a joint task force. And so there was a lot of, they really had to work hard to make sure to continue operating at the, at a, sufficiently high operational tempo to achieve the goals in that region, and they did. But it was just one of the many things that deployment showed was the adaptability of the Marine Corps, the culture, because it's like, they all train to be deployed in a MAGTAF environment, as a MU or as a MEF, Marine Expeditionary Force, MEB, or an SP MAGTAF, Special Purpose MAGTAF. And this situation was, I don't want to say not ideal. Technically, it was not ideal, but they made it ideal. They worked it out. Now, when I was with you guys, that was the MEB, the 2nd Marine Expeditionary Brigade. Is that correct? That was in, yep, it was, and then they rolled it into, it actually might have been a special purpose. No, I think they did roll it into a MEF after that, shortly after that. It was full-blown division level, right? I can't remember.
Yeah, I always remember. Yeah, because we were RCT 7, which is
right.
I don't know, because you're deployed as a regimental combat team, and there's battalions from different regiments. So
right.
So you're like unit awards, and we were with 9th Marines technically
right.
in the pecking order. So it was
you guys were OPCON. Your Fox company was OPCON 3-9.
Yeah, so we were 2-9, 3-9, not third. Well, you were talking earlier. I kind of want to touch on that real quick. So you're saying the Marine Corps helicopters. I remember hearing about this for some training, because we got on some Blackhawks in Bridgeport, and they were saying, like the 46s and something. They have a ceiling clearance. Marine helicopters are meant to operate lower. Like, how?
Not all of them.
Okay.
No. So it's helicopter by helicopter. How much weight is on the helicopter, and then the density altitude, which is pressure altitude adjusted for temperature. Someone's going to comment on this. If I'm maybe a little rusty, by the way, for a lot of this stuff, I'm going to try to be as precise as I can and as accurate as I can. I may make some mistakes. I mean, we're just talking about a lot of different topics here, but so, a helicopter doesn't have unlimited power. And so certain helicopters perform very well up at high altitude. As you go higher, the density altitude gets higher. And for any given altitude that you're flying a helicopter or an airplane, for any given altitude, as you increase the temperature, you're essentially operating at a higher altitude because it's less dense. So it's a little bit of a tongue twister, because you say that's high density altitude or higher density altitude, but it's actually lower density, meaning the density is representative of a higher altitude. So, and then you have IGE hover, OGE hover, in-ground effect hover, out-of-ground effect hover. So these are different types of situations where performance really can be degraded substantially, and they call it high, hot, and heavy. And you have to, some of these operations, like in Afghanistan in the summertime and RC East, there were high, hot, and heavy operations because they were loading helicopters up, not necessarily all the way to their maximum, but it was high altitude and it was warm temperatures, and so some helicopters, every helicopter eventually is going to run into fundamental natural limitations where they just can no longer, those rotor blades spin at a constant speed, like in a Black Hawk is 258 RPM, I believe. And, you can only load it up so much. And there's different, can we go into a hover at this altitude? No, but we can, fly forward through, they call it ETL, effective translational lift. Now we're getting a little bit technical, but landing can be difficult, taking off again can be difficult. So helicopters that do really well up at high altitude include the CH-47, which is like, from what I know, from what I understand, I'm not a pilot, not a helicopter pilot, but is one of the best helicopters ever developed. It's got a ton of power. And they do very well up at high altitude. They use them up in Alaska on Mount McKinley for rescues. They've hovered that thing up at 18,000 feet, even a little bit higher. They've landed it up there at that altitude. But a CH-46, which is sort of the little brother of the CH-47, is renowned as being underpowered. So they definitely use them up at Bridgeport. I have tons of photographs of them up at Bridgeport. It's just that as the temperature goes up, that limits their what they can be used for, and also, there's a limitation on how many people can be and how much weight they can carry. So you don't want to be in a situation where the helicopter that you have can only carry 2 packs. That's not going to work on 2 passengers. But, like the CH-53 Echo, now they have the CH-53K, the Kingston, the Kilo. Those have a lot of power. Those can function very well up at high altitude. But the Marines that I'm talking about, the 332, 3, and 13, they did not deploy as a MU. They did not have an ACE, an air combat element. So, going back real quick to the MAGTF construct, battalion level. So you have a MU, Marine Expeditionary Unit. That's a battalion level MAGTF, and so they've got the BLT, the Battalion Landing Team, is a battalion plus. Really, there's not just a battalion; it's people added onto that, and then Navy Hospital Corpsmen and engineers and that kind of thing. And then you've got the ACE, which is the air combat element, and they'll have 53s. Back then, Harriers. And today it's F-35Bs, and they've got Cobras and now they've got AH-1Z Vipers, and then a UH-1Y Yankee Venoms. Am I mixing those two up? I believe that's, yeah. The UH-1Y is the Venom. The H-1Z Zulu is the Viper. And, so you've got those guys, the HMLAs, the attack squadrons. You've got the HMMs, the heavy lift, and then you've got the Ospreys, the VMM, the Marine Medium Tilt Rotor squadrons. And so that's what you have today. And they, ideally, the Marine Corps will go with that package, that MAGTF package. In 2005, they didn't have, they could have had, had they deployed as a MAGTF, as a MU, then they would have had the 53s, they would have had AH-1 Ws, the Whiskey Cobras, 2-bladed Cobras. They would have had the UH-1N, the November, which is, I flew around in the UH-1s quite a bit in Iraq, and they're awesome helicopters. They are they're renowned as being underpowered. Like there were certain things they couldn't carry once the temperature got hot. But when they upgraded to the Y, which is 4-bladed helicopter, a lot more power, That started in, I think the first deployment was in 2010 for that. And so I don't believe that there are any Novembers left. But anyway, you know, within the Marine Corps itself at the time, they did have helicopters that could have supported these operations up to the altitudes that they were at in June, July, and August, and the hottest part of the year for them. So high, hot, and heavy. That would have been the CH-53, but they didn't have the ACE. They weren't a MAGTF. They were there as integrated into a joint task force. So that's one of the things that the Marines really had to work around, and they did it quite well. You know, that's one of the foundations of the ethos of the Marine Corps is adaptability and figuring things out, you know, and doing it quickly and effectively. So like you guys did it, you know, with those, remember those sticks you had to probe for IEDs? I mean, that's like a Marine Corps thing. So
It didn't cost the Marine Corps anything, so they loved it.
like it's adapt and fight. So
you meet 2-3 at Bridgeport. Do you deploy with them immediately? Do you show up later on?
No, I met them out in Afghanistan, and so at Bridgeport, MC to MWTC, Marine Corps Mountain Warfare Training Center, I was with them. You know, I actually spent most of my time with 2-3 out in the field, and I had a great time. And at the time, I was living in the mountains in southern Colorado, up at 8,600 feet, and so I had my house on 10 acres. It was off grid, you know, beautiful view of 4 14,000 foot peaks. And I sold it to follow the Marines around because they said, hey, you know, you can, how about you come out to Afghanistan with us? And I said, all right, that sounds good. And so I went back and I sold the house, and it was at the top of the market, fortuitously. And so then I spent the summer at Bridgeport, basically embedded with what they call there's the mountain leader course, summer and winter. And I was there with the summer, and I tell you what, it was awesome. Like it was, you know, it's 21 years ago, but sometimes I think about that. It was just like a dream, you know, you're out there taking pictures, you know, you're taking notes and learning about all this stuff, climbing mountains and, you know, camping out next to rivers and, you know, getting ready to go to Afghanistan. And so in October, I went to Afghanistan and I showed up. I didn't really know what was going on. I didn't know what to expect at all. And boy, they because I was able to keep up with the Marines when they were doing their pre-deployment work, but keep up with the Marines of 2-3 when they were there in March at MWTC. They basically thought, okay, let's put this guy at the tip of the spear, and I didn't know that. So I got to Bagram. And then I had never been on a helicopter before, and I loaded onto a 47. And I just remember the PAO, he was an Army PAO, Rick Scavetta, really awesome guy. I just remember him smiling at me and being like, keep your head down, you know? And I was like, what? And so I just got it, and we were just flying across the Afghan landscape with 2 Apache gunships, you know, escorting us. And I was like, this is really awesome. You know, taking tons of pictures, and got to Jalalabad, and then Asadabad, and then the next thing you know, I'm on a convoy, and I'm like, where am I going? In the back of a Humvee and high back. And then I got to Waterpore village, and then I was like, wow, I'm really getting out there. And then that night we went on this convoy. There was a thunderstorm, there was lightning everywhere, there was rain. I lost one of my cameras, drenched. And I got to Camp Blessing, they call the tip of the spear. It was named after Jay Blessing, a 75th Ranger Regiment Ranger who was killed by an IED in 2003. And so Blessing had been like a school. The Taliban took it over. And then I believe the order was SF, Special Forces went there. They took it over. ODAs occupied it. And they established working with locals there, basically local mercenaries, ASF, Afghan Security Forces, they call them. And then, now I'm going to get this wrong because I can't quite remember it, but the MEU, was it the 26th MEU that came into Kandahar. I can't remember, but it must have been, it was a MEU that was there in 2003. So they took it over from ODA. I don't remember what ODA was. ODA, by the way, is Operational Detachment Alpha, for anybody listening that doesn't know. That's a special forces construct. And so that's how they deploy. There's ODAs, ODBs, Operational Detachment Bravo. That's a higher command to ODAs. ODAs are the guys that are, generally are on the ground and go out and do things. So do ODBs, but they're more command echelon. But so the Marines were there. It was 2-8 or something. I can't remember. And so then after that, that's when 3-3 came, and then 2-3 after that. But this place was pretty wild. It was the person who administered it was 25 years old, Matt. He was in charge of the base, and then Matt Bartles, and he did a lot of coin work in the area with the Marines, and then Pat Kinzer, who was platoon commander of Echo 1. So 1st Platoon, Echo Company, 2nd Battalion, 3rd Marine Regiment, 3rd Marine Division. And I just remember being on the concrete floor at 3 a.m, drenched, trying to see what cameras I had. I shot film at the time, trying to make sure everything was okay. And Pat came in, and he was standing there, and we're just like, and I just was like a, drowned rat looking guy. And then he was talking about like, yeah, well, you're going to enjoy coming outside the wire with us. And I go, I thought I was going to be in a forward operating base, just taking notes after everybody came back. He goes, you're coming into combat with us, you're going home. And I thought, okay, well, I guess I'm going into combat with you, because this was so far out there. And the next morning I got a tour, and the Marines, when they went out, they got all sorts of intel hits, and they would go out and they would do these cache raids. Basically, cache means CACHE, not cash money, but they would raid these caches for Dishka machine guns. Like this is it's essentially a 12.7. It's basically a 50 cal. It's like a 12.7 millimeter. It's 12.7 by 104 or something. A little bit bigger than a BMG round. Well, you can explain that. You're a weapons expert, but it'd be like Dishkas, which they used. It was old Soviet stuff or Chinese stuff, Soviet era type stuff, RPGs, mines, all this stuff. But they were supposed to turn it all in and send it up, but the Marines just kept it. And so they ringed this base with all these old, like one's gun called a ZPU-1 Type 75. It's a 14.7 millimeter anti-aircraft gun. They had a few of those all over this base. It just aimed outward as defenses, and it was like it was like a Mad Max type thing. And it was because they got attacked so frequently, and they needed that was their defense. They wanted every ounce of defense they could muster. So actually, a few days before I arrived there, very unfortunately, there was a mortar attack, and it killed Lance Corporal Stephen Valdez. I believe that was in late September. I was there early October. He was killed right outside the COC. Very unfortunate, but that was the first operation I went on. Was they have a thing called an LCMR, lightweight countermortar radar. You guys had one at the Typhoons that gets a reverse azimuth. Mortars fly in this parabolic trajectory, and they had found the grid where it originated, and it wasn't the next day. I got there late at night, and the next day I got my introduction. And one of the things, I guess it's not a big deal. It's been 21 years, but Pat was like, so you know how to use all the basic Marine Corps infantry weapon systems, right? And I was like, is this guy joking or what? And I go, no. He goes, all right, well, Bradley, go teach him. So I got the crash course that next day and how to, shoot an M16 and a bunch of different other things. And it was, it was pretty wild. It was really, I look back on that and I was like, you couldn't dream this up. And then the Operation Valdez kicked off, and they started pounding this ridge line with 120s that they borrowed from the Army, 120 millimeter mortars. organically, the Marine Corps has 60 millimeter mortars, which are, I think you guys had a 62, but the Typhoons, right?
Yeah, we had 60s, and then the
80,
battalion would have 81s.
81s, yeah.
I
So
think
there's,
regiment, yeah.
yeah. So they had 120s, and then we went and they started pounding this ridge, and then Chinooks came in, and we loaded on with the ASF, and that was right up into that ridge where they were softening it up, and got out, and there was no enemy. It was very exciting, and that was how things began with me for embedding with the Marine Corps. And then I ended up my last moment, the moment that I actually decided this is it, was you were on post when I was outside the wire with no PPE on, like a moron, and I was like, nothing's going to happen. And then, like, snap, then you were even saying, go inside, get your PPP on, and then snap. And I was like, oh my God, I'm getting shot at. He missed.
Well, it's great. And like one of the few times that post ever got shot at. And like we were always in that intersection every day. And that's like month 5. And
Mm-hmm.
it's like you come out there, you're only there for 5 minutes, but they saw you out there and you must have pissed somebody off because stones started lighting it up. I was reading a book. I hate to admit it. I was like up there behind the 240, and I was like, what the hell? Like, what's going on? I didn't realize they shot at us anymore. Like, because it'd been so quiet. It'd been so weirdly, but yeah, they just wanted the opportunity. So
Well,
I'm glad they didn't hit you.
me too, because it was right over my head. I could, it's like if it's, obviously if it hits you, I don't know if you hear it or not because you're dead. No one's around to say, but if it's within, like, right on your head to about 3 inches, it makes the snap, and 3 inches and up it makes the whiz, right? The whizzing sound. I've heard both, and yeah, I'm glad the guy missed. He was not trained as a Marine infantry rifleman, thankfully. But I think it was because I stood out. I was wearing jeans, or was I can't remember these, and I had I did have PP, but I think when they saw, yep, that's it. That's what I was wearing right there. I think that's your photograph. I think that when they see someone with Marines who's walking around in jeans and a T-shirt, whether they have PPE on or not, they think, all right, this is a nice target, because it's some outsider type, and they go for it. So I don't know the dynamics with their targeting, but who knows? So, yep.
I really hope there you go.
Yep. I got my ID on.
Have you seen this picture before, Ed? Do you have this one of you?
I don't think I've seen that one. No, that's funny.
Yeah, I'll get these over to you. We were talking before, but this is with my squad in 2011. But
Yeah.
I kind of want to, I want to keep us on track because I want to talk. So the Marines were raiding, they were going out and collecting Dishka rounds so they could use them. That's crazy.
They weren't collecting Dishka rounds. They were collecting Dishkas, PKs, AKs, RPGs, ZPU-1s, vehicles. They would take, I believe it's an 88 millimeter recoilless rifle. They had a truck that they welded it on the back. I mean, they had everything there. I mean, it was just, they were on their own. I mean, they were in Afghanistan, but I don't know if you've read about, like, some of these, living with the locals type stuff in Vietnam, MACG SOG, they would go over the borders and stuff. The Marines weren't going over into Pakistan. They were right next to Pakistan. It didn't really even matter, but they had ASF with them, Afghan Security Forces, which were basically, they're basically mercenaries that lived with the Marines, and the Marines trained them, and they were doing that mission basically, and they were subsisting. I mean, we would eat locally. Yep, there's one of the ASF right there. And that was right after the insert, and I was very happy to be alive. I was like, because they were saying, well, there might be Taliban up there that light us up, and you're in a helicopter. Get out of the helicopter as soon as you hit the ground. Just get out of it, because they're like, when they hit the helicopters, it's a big fireball and all this stuff. I was like, okay, well, I'll get out of the helicopter. And we got out, and everything worked out. But I mean, it was my embedding experience was unique in that, I was there as an independent. I credentialed as an independent. It was my own business, basically my own media company. And I took all the risks. I spent all the money to get over there and all the other stuff. And, that's how it transpired. But to the Marines at Camp Blessing, these are the guys that they were with, and they couldn't arm them with American weapons. But when they would capture this stuff, I mean, they had a lot of stuff there. They had a lot of munitions, and at Camp Blessing, it was like I said, you couldn't make this stuff up. It was really, Kinzer was like, or Pat was like, yeah, it's like summer camp with guns, and it was just, it was wild. So, but I took a lot of really great pictures. I learned a lot. And that's where the victory point came from, because I was able to, two things. I was able to learn about it from the Marines who had participated in it, primarily in the recovery stuff, but who also knew about the area, the AO, specific AO where they were at. And then furthermore, because I had gone there, then people started talking to me and they explained things to me, because normally, a media type, especially an independent media type, they would be like, yeah, I'm not talking to you because you guys get it wrong, this and that. And, I learned about infantry tactics from the ground up in, up in the mountains and at 21 Palms, and then out in Afghanistan. And then I learned about those specific operations by being with the Marines in that AO just a few months after they had been conducted. And, I met a lot of key people, and then people that I didn't meet in Afghanistan. They said, oh, yeah, talk to this guy. He wants to know about whalers and Red Wings. And so that's what the culmination of, well, there's been many culminations, but I mean, the initial culmination of that was Victory Point, and it was accurate. And one of the big things, people got upset because, in the book Lone Survivor, there was, I can't remember the ridiculous claim of 200 or 400 fighters and all this nonsense, and I gave the realistic, number, which was, I think it was, like 10 or 12. That was this whole team size. The ambush, I think it was 7 or 8 guys. People didn't want to hear that at all. They got mad, but so be it. And so that, and I continue to do work on Red Wings. I've got another book coming out here real soon. But back to the Marines the Marines deployed in that area. That was, they had an amazing deployment. You think about, like, they're sent out to this, at the time in 2005, Afghanistan there was almost no coverage of it. There was no media out there, very few. Everybody wanted to go to Iraq, Iraq. And then, Red Wings happened and the shoot down happened, and there was some interest, but, still, first of all, it's very difficult to move around out there. You got to be in shape. It's hard to embed with Marines, but they knew that I could do it because I had spent time with them in March, and then I spent time during the Mountain Leader course through the summer, and then I went out to Afghanistan. So the physical fitness aspect was not a problem, and the mental outlook and being able to live in austere situations wasn't a problem. So it was really just it just happened. It was a really interesting, the tragedy of Red Wings was horrible and terrible, and everybody, including myself, wishes it never happened. But me, whether Red Wings happened or not, I was still going to go to Afghanistan. That decision for me to go to Afghanistan was made before Red Wings happened. Although while I was at Bridgeport, they were planning it. Scott Westerfield, the intelligence officer, battalion intel officer, the two, was there, and he was getting regular updates during their pre-deployment workup, and so I didn't know about it, of course. Nobody knew about it. Very few people knew about it. And it was still called STARS at the time. So anyway, I'm talking a lot. You should talk.
No, it's just so interesting that you foot the bill the entire time. You sell your house. There's
Hmm.
nobody sponsoring you. The Marine Corps is not giving you any money. Nobody's giving you. You're just doing this off like a handshake, like a hey, here's my ID. I'm Ed Darack. I'm American. Let me go over there. And the U.S. government's like, we don't give a shit. Like, go have fun. Like,
Yeah.
it's kind of it sounds like cowboy culture, honestly. Like 2005.
Well, yeah, I mean, I was a recognized media company, basically. Uh, you can have really big companies and really small companies. And, while I was in Afghanistan, I didn't foot the bill. I mean, I didn't pay for my portion of the fuel and helicopters or anything, but flying over there, all the cameras, I mean, I paid for all that. And, it was not cheap, but who wouldn't do that? I mean, think about it. Like, it's like a dream. I mean, it was like just to be in the mountains of eastern Afghanistan, fighting with the Marine Corps, not fighting with them, although I did get to shoot an M16 during a firefight at one point. So I guess I was, and, just living with the Marines and their local Afghan fighters out in the wilds. I mean, it was like, it was, it was awesome. I mean, there was some frightening parts of it, of course, and there were several subsequent embeds that I participated in. I did 6 total, 4 to Afghanistan, twice to Iraq, and there was very terrible, horrible things that happened. I don't regret going on any of them, but it was, it's you get very rarely do you have an opportunity like that, and I made that opportunity not knowing what it was going to turn into. It's like, of course, I want to go to Afghanistan with the Marines in the mountains. How awesome is that? So.
Especially with your history of being, you said you're a mountaineer. You had hiked Denali back in the 90s before.
Yeah,
Okay, so you said you lived off the grid, so
yeah.
you're just already lined up for this high intensity adrenaline sort of life. And yeah, it's Bridgeport's beautiful. The training sucks, but it's beautiful. It sucks in
I,
a good way. You learn a
yeah,
lot.
yeah. I love Bridgeport. It is such an awesome facility. They do so many great things there. It is tough, tough, tough. One of the, and Marines say, yeah, they're complaining about it. It's hard. I don't want to go there, but it's like the best training. It's so hard, and it really, really pushes people to beyond what they think they can do. Like I participated in Winter Mountain Leader course as, not the whole thing, but, went out there one day. There was we're in they call it a BV, a bandwagon. It's it's a Swedish made. They don't use them anymore. They use snowcats, but it's like this Swedish snowcat basically, and it's got a really good heater, from Sweden. You would imagine they would make these things that work really well, make their heaters work really well. But we went out to this frozen lake. We got out there, and there's a chainsaw, a bottle of whiskey, and a defibrillator, and a Marine and a Navy hospital corpsman. And the chainsaw was used to cut a big hole in the ice. And then everybody proceeded to ski into the water at 9,000 something feet, overcast. And then the defibrillator was there if if you went into cardiac arrest, which I did not. And then you have to like get the skis off, tread water, not drown, get your backpack off, and then you have to answer questions. You have to say your social security number in reverse while you're treading water and getting your skis off. And it's like, I don't know if you've done any of that before, but as soon as you hit that water and it's cold, it's amazing. It's like you can't breathe, and you got to struggle. And then Scott Steffen, who was at the time the OIC of MLC Mountain Leader course, he was before this. He's like, we're obviously they're not going to let you drown, but part of the instruction was if you're ever in a situation you can't get out, you put your arms up on the side of the frozen lake and you let them freeze. You'll lose your arms, but if you get found, they'll amputate your arms, but at least you won't die. I mean, that's how hardcore that training is. So, but anyway, I didn't freeze my arms to the side of a lake, frozen lake, but I did go into the water, and I got out. Actually, I was able to get out. They didn't have to fish me out, but boy, and they did not have to use the defibrillator. But if you make it out without having to use the defibrillator, and they don't pull you out, then you get a shot of whiskey. So
That's awesome. You just seemed, because you know so much about the Marine Corps that you know more than me, like all the terminology, how everything breaks down. It just seems to come like naturally to you. So then you come back from Afghanistan from this 2005 deployment. And did you follow 2-3 to Iraq? Because you've written 2 books
yep,
about 2-3. All
yep,
right. So then actually I have one of your books right here.
yep,
I need to get
yep.
you to sign this there. I bought this at the store, but this is
Awesome, yeah,
Warriors of Anbar, the
yep.
Marines who crushed Al Qaeda, the greatest untold story of the Iraq War. So I'll link to your books down below,
Cool.
obviously.
Thank you.
But so then you leave Afghanistan. Then do you go to Iraq because of the connections you have with the battalion, or you just?
Yep. Yeah. So after I got back from um, my first trip, my first embed in Afghanistan, I was in California. And so I went out to Bridgeport again to do more work on Operation Red Wings. And, there's a bunch of business things. I, worked with a literary agent, and I started doing a lot of the groundwork there. And so that was in late 2005 and then into 2006. Early 2006, I went to Hawaii when those guys got back. And so I met them on their return and continued working and interviewing people that I couldn't interview because I was, in Afghanistan. They threw me out in the middle of nowhere. I was not near the headquarters. I didn't meet anybody in senior leadership until I got to Hawaii. And so then that's when things really took off for the book. And then that, I went to, those guys got back. They did a 28-day leave, and that would have been in early, like January, early February of 2006. And then they started immediately training to deploy to AO Denver, the Anbar province of Iraq. So after 3-3 was done with their rotation in OEF in Afghanistan, they went back, 28-day leave. They started their pre-deployment workup after that 28-day leave. So they would have been, I believe they got into Iraq in November of 2005. And then 2-3 followed them, and then 1-3 followed 2-3. So they just followed each other in those rotations, once in OEF and once in OIF. And so I went over in 2007, I believe it was for about 8 weeks in Anbar province in February, March. So that's where this photograph was taken. That's, I believe it's MSR bronze, maybe MSR uranium. I think it's bronze. That was the main one that came down from the Haditha Dam. So that was definitely different. My embed in Iraq was much more structured, and the battalion command did a great job of that. They make sure that I visited all the companies, the line companies, including weapons, which had been reworked to be used as a line company. They're basically mobile. I think they call them mobile assault platoon. So they were all over the place. And then Fox Company was over in Parwana. Oh boy, now I'm going to get in trouble because I can't. Echo Company was in Iraq, was in Haditha. Golf Company was in Haklanea. And then Abu Hayat is where a whiskey company was. So, and then after that, I swore I'd never go back to Iraq again. And then I got to Al Assad, and a few days there, at the end of this first embed, and some really wonderful public affairs officers were there, and they said, "Well, you're here. You got some time?" And I said, "Yeah." Well, let's go check out some of the aircraft. And so I actually went up in a C-130J and during refueling operations, and then I kind of got this idea. Has anybody ever embedded with a Marine Air Wing? And they're like, "Not that we know. Let's see if you can do it." And so in May, I returned. Yep, those are the Hornets, the Coveys, the oh gosh, 121, the green. Am I getting that wrong? VMFA AW 121, the Green Knights. That's who they're from. That's who they're with. Kraft, Lieutenant Colonel Kraft was the CO. But we went up. This was in May of 2007, and so this was during combat. So we were integrating me as a photographer, and this went all the way up to the wing commanding general of the 2nd Marine Air Wing. You can see that it's all loaded up with bombs and everything. And in the daylight pictures, you can see the yellow stripe, which means they're live. It's not training. And it was very, there's the VMA 211, Ace of Spades. Is that right? Marine Attack Squadron 211, VMA 211, right? I believe that's that. And that's Matt Vaught in the flying. Shocker is his call sign. And I tell you what, those guys got close. We had the ramp down. I had my, the triple, quadruple check to make sure everything was snapped in, and I went right to the edge of the loading ramp. And they dropped the loading ramp, and then they would fuel, and they would come, and we would do like a minute of photo shoots because it was live. There was combat going on, so we just had seconds to get some of these shots. And I was on a ICS with a loadmaster. The loadmaster was on with the pilots. The pilots were on the hook with these guys, and so we were coordinating that way with all this noise. It was just, again, another awesome time with the Marine Corps. It's like only the Marine Corps would do this, and it worked out. So we had some amazing shots, and it was for Smithsonian Air and Space. We did a nice photo feature of a deployed Marine Air Wing at war. This is similar. This is in 2009 in Malaysia during ex-Karat, which is a big, used to be U.S. PACOM, now it's U.S. Indo-PACOM. It's with the Royal Malaysian Air Force, RMAF, those MiG-29s below. You see all the smoke. And then the F-A-18 Hornets of VMFA AW 225. Oh my God, I can't remember I'm so pissed I can't remember the name. But Lieutenant Colonel Doug Pasnick was the CO. I met Doug in 29 Palms in 2005, and he invited me to go out because during, every 2 years, I don't know if they still do it, but it's a cooperative thing where the Marine Corps Hornets, well, now it would be a F-35 squadron, trains with the RMAF squadron. And so, weapons don't come off the rails, but they do all the solutions, and, they, debrief and figure out, it's called WVR, within visual range engagements. So dogfighting basically. And once again, we had the C-130. I was up there hooked in and ramped down, and a lot of photographs. So, but this is not in war, this is training.
For the, sorry if we have a question. We have a question is, how much paperwork does it take to get embedded with a Marine Air Wing or just any of this Marine units or combat unit? Is it just a simple email? Do you have to sign waivers? Like, shoot somebody a call? Do you talk to the Pentagon, I'm guessing, and then they approve you? And
for me, the way I always did it was that it was handled by the unit. So the unit was like, we want this guy, like 2-3, we want this guy. And, the Air Wing, we want this guy, the general, because, Matt Sewell, I don't think he'll get mad if I say his name, who's awesome public affairs guy for this embed. He briefed it to the general, and he's like, yep, this is awesome. The general was really excited about it. He's like, this is history, we want to document it. So just like previously in Iraq, where Colonel Donnellan, Lieutenant Colonel Jim Donnellan, who was the CO of 2nd Battalion, 3rd Marines, in Afghanistan for their rotation there for Operation Whalers, and then to the end, and then also in Iraq, he said, all right, him and his staff, all right, we want him to visit every, company-sized element. So, and the same thing with the air wing. The general was like, all right, they've got Harriers, Hornets, HMLAs, skids, Cobra skid, Snake skid, H1W, UH1 November, HMLA, and then they had a 53 Delta Squadron, the Ugly Angels, HMM, I can't remember. It's Ugly Angels. So they had the 53 Deltas, the HMLA, the Hornets, the Harriers, no 53 Echoes, but they had C-130s, VMGR, which I'm taking these pictures from. Can't forget them. Those guys are awesome. And then they had an attached dust off, so from Germany. So I flew with them at night, which was exciting. First thing I did, they're like, all right, jump on the dust off. So dust off is an air ambulance, Army medevac. So since the Marine Corps aviation, unless things have changed, because it's been several years for me, they do not have organic medevac. They do CASEVAC, which is sort of ad hoc, and they've got TTPs for that, tactics, techniques, and procedures for CASEVAC. I don't know if they're formally doctrinalized or anything like that, but the dust off pilots, who are absolutely amazing, by the way. They save a lot of people's lives. They have saved a lot of people's lives, and they are very brave people, because a lot of times they go in, they don't have any guns on those Hawks, it's Black Hawks. So I flew with them, and that was really exciting. We flew low, really low at night over Baghdad, and it was wild flying over. You see entire banks of lights just turn off, and the system for at the time it was a really high MANPADS threat, which is a man-portable air defense system. It's a surface-to-air heat-seeking missile, and they've got those flares that pop. And I forgot. Also, I flew with I mentioned Harriers, Hornets, 53 Deltas, HMLAs, and then VMGR, but also the HMM, Marine Medium Helicopter Squadron, which was the 46s, the Frogs. So, which they phased out and replaced with the Osprey beginning in 2007. So anyway, did I cover everything adequately right there? Talked a lot.
Yeah, no, I just find it interesting that you're able to bounce around so easily. I was able to actually, for the Haditha deployment, because this thing's taking forever to upload. Maybe it won't load. So for how long were you with the 2-3 Marines in Iraq then, the infantry guys, before you went over to the air wing?
Well,
and what was like the biggest takeaway from that deployment from your perspective covering it? Because it sounds like the Marine Corps is using you as like a historian to document all of their history. So I never really thought of it that way. It's like a benefit for them.
Well, it's not that they were using me or I was using them. It just sort of worked out. It was like, I loved it. I am not going to beat around the bush with that. I love being embedded with Marines. I wouldn't do it now, but I love being embedded with Marines in combat. It was awesome to include with you guys. It was just great. And, when you really are enjoying yourself and you're really, things are really working, like you get amazing photographs, you learn the story, what's going on. And it just works out. And they're like, okay, this guy wants to go out with Marine infantry and spend weeks in the field. Okay, that's not a problem. So right? Yeah. And by the way, a lot of talking. I didn't even answer your question about the paperwork. The paperwork was not that. It was not that much paperwork. It was like emails and meet us here and sign this waiver and that's it. And then you just go for it. That's the one great thing about the Marines is that it's such a no bullshit organization. It is the no BS zone with those guys, with you guys. You're a Marine, and if you're gonna be out there and carry your weight, and I carried mortar rounds and machine gun rounds and stuff like that. For some of these operations, I was like, okay, I can carry more weight, put them in my backpack, MREs, water, all that stuff, and I mean, I don't know what a traditional embed is like because I've never done one, and I've met a few of the people, but from what I can gather, it's not different. I mean, I was learning about it from their perspective, from like your guys' perspective. I wasn't there asking questions like, "What do you think of the war?" Or I mean, I remember having fun out on our patrols, right? I mean, it was like, it was serious business. I shouldn't say fun. It wasn't fun getting shot at. I mean, it was serious business.
It was fun.
Any step you can
well, that wasn't fun. Yeah.
Any step you take could be an IED or something like that, or you get, take IDF, direct fire, mortars, rockets, whatever, snipers. But the guy shooting at me was not a sniper, thankfully. If he was, I wouldn't be here. But, it was different. I think my experience was different. So, but the paperwork was minimal. And then with being with 2-3 in Iraq, the key takeaway there for me was that was a rough deployment. That was really rough. I mean, I don't want to get in, I wrote about it in the book Warriors of Ambar, but a lot of people died, and it was very, I'm so glad I went. I just remember getting back to the Haditha Dam. So they had me dress like a Marine. They had me wear digital camis because there was intel that they had gotten there was a lot of JSOC stuff going on in that part of Iraq at the time. It was very busy. And, the Marines were doing coin. They were interacting with the locals. They were doing nation building stuff. And then the enemy was always on the lookout for someone, and of course they interacted. Like a lot of times the Marines would do outer cordon for some of these JSOC hits. But they apparently, there was some intel. They're like, hey, there's this guy. He's not a Marine. He's wearing jeans. He's got military body armor. What's going on? Let's get him. Right. So there was a bounty. I actually, it's one of the things I could say, like, have you had a fatwa on you in your life? Check that box. Yeah, it was a fatwa, I guess. I don't know the specific definition of a fatwa, but from what I was told.
Did you find out how much money?
20,000.
Or did they give you 20,000?
Yeah,
and that's in 2006 dollars. So that's like 100,000 today.
I don't know. Yeah. Well, supposedly, this was told to me. I don't know. But they said you can't go outside the wire. So a really awesome Marine officer, Nick, he loaned me, he gave me his camis, and I still have them. And so I had to cross the Euphrates River, and they're like, well, they blew up all the bridges early in OIF. And so there's like these pontoon bridges, and like, all right, well, there's like Marine Riverines, they weren't available. The SEALs were in the area, they weren't available. So like, all right, you got to go and cross in a civilian boat. You got to pay some local to drive you across and hope that he's not going to try to collect that money to get you on an Al-Qaeda beheading video, And so that was interesting. We went down to a location to cross. It was right by the IED site where Mike Scholl had been killed, and Gonzalez died there. It was a terrible location. I took some pictures there for the family, but you don't want to sit around those palm groves for very long, and we were there too long, basically. And there was a DM, a designated marksman there, and what we were waiting for the local boat, and we were waiting for a mixed section escort. It wasn't far across the Euphrates River. What is it, a half a mile or something? You don't want to fall in. It was February or March. But I got in the boat, and they're like, we can't wait around. We can't wait around. The air's not here. You're just going to have to go and hope this guy doesn't, steer off and try to get this bounty on your head, or even if he even knows about it. So I was like, all right. And so I got in and laid down, and there was a dad, the guy driving, he was a nice guy, and his son was there. And we just were motoring across the bridge, and I was just like, there was a designated marksman there, just in case. And then I was looking at him, and getting out to about the middle of the river, and then I hear this, it was tense, obviously. Many bad things can happen. And I started hearing the rotors, and I looked over, and here comes this Cobra around the around the bend with a Huey on top of him. Oh no, it was the Huey down low, and then because the Hueys flew a lot, the Whiskeys flew a lot faster than the Hueys, and so the Cobra was up top doing this S shape, and they just came right on the water, and the guy flew right over, and I could just see the guy on the minigun almost like smiling. I was just like, "Thank you," and they just started orbiting, and I was like, "All right, finish this up, get on the other side, get out." The Marines over there were pissed off. They're like, "You've been waiting around here, waiting to get shot," and so because they were up against some very skilled fighters. They're some of the worst of Al Qaeda were there. They had 120s zeroed onto courtyards of some of their combat outposts. I mean, like interior courtyards. They could land 120s inside these compounds. Dead. They had a sniper. They got one guy. They had ballistic glass that wasn't all the way. It was like maybe an inch or 2 inches apart. They put this ballistic glass up for when people would stand post, and he was walking back and forth, and the guy got him as he walked past this 2 inch, separation of these two ballistic glass. They were very good fighters. I mean, it was like, it was a very tough fight. So, but they achieved success basically through, I describe it in that book. It was rough, but it was very different than Afghanistan. So that was Iraq in a nutshell. And then, sorry.
I was gonna say the Al Qaeda, because after Al Qaeda gets kind of pushed out of Ramadi and Fallujah, they start moving closer to the Syrian border, and then so it's a lot of foreign fighters that the Marines are going up against. So this is late 2005 into 2000. No. This is 2006 into 2007.
Yep.
So this is like peak of not great in Iraq. This is like the worst months of it.
Yep.
2-3, I think, loses 23 Marines on that deployment, if I remember correctly. But
I don't know. I can't remember the exact number, but it was high. Yeah, it was rough. I mean, it was rough. I didn't know what I was getting into, and I got into it, and I toughed it out. I just remember getting back to the dam, which was like the safe zone, the Haditha Dam. And boy, I was spent. And Colonel Donald saw me, and he started laughing. He's like, "You look like you've been in a war, Ed." And I was just like, I'd lost 20 pounds, and I was just like ready to just lay down and sleep, because as you know, you don't really sleep a whole lot. And so then that was it. I got on a 53 and back to Al Assad, and then I'm never coming back to Iraq. And then I came back to Iraq a couple months later with the air wing. And
do you have? I'm just kind of curious. Like after experiences like that, you're like, all right, I did it. Like I've done it. Now you've done it like 3 times. So what makes you want to? You come back. You write Victory Point. Victory Point comes out in the spring of 2009. And then you just have like a drive to get back to experience? Are you like adrenaline, trying to catch I don't know if that's the appropriate way to say it, but like adrenaline junkie, we're just trying to live the experience because you come back, and then we can talk about the last embed you did. Because I think it's kind of interesting how you close out in the same unit.
Yeah, I mean, it was, I had opportunities, and one of the things I tell people, it's like, I just never said no to the Marine Corps. I got, an email once. They were like, "Hey, VMM 261, it's the first, Osprey squadron, MV-22B Osprey squadron to be in Afghanistan." And, that the Osprey had, unfortunately, unfairly, some very bad press about the development of the program. And they said, "Hey, you want to come out, and this is their first deployment. You want to be with them?" And I was like, "Yes, I do. I'm coming. Just tell me where. Tell me when." And so I did. And then, right after Victory Point came out, I actually went to Afghanistan, back to RC East. I was with the ETT, Embedded Training Team. There were small mentoring teams that would attach to ANA and Kandak and some of these different. You guys were attached to ANA and Kandax in RC East, and so there was that. And then my last one was with with you guys. So, but yeah, it was. I always just, and you do it, and then you do it until it's not appropriate to do anymore. And that was that moment when you were there saying, get back in the combat outpost. You don't have on your PPE. And I was like, whatever, snap. And I was like, this is it. This is the end. No more. So.
Yeah. It's a good way to, I guess it's a good way to be told in a way. But yeah, I just always remember, because you were talking about how you didn't ask us about, like, what do you think of the war? And you're the only reporter I ever met. And I never even thought about that. I was like, I don't know. The only reporter I ever met was really cool. He just wanted to hang out with us. And like, because I don't know if you slept in the same tent, but you would always like hang out. You interviewed Bert, my squad leader.
Yeah.
And you just fell in pretty easily. But I mean, like, I knew you had written Victory Point, but I guess you just kind of you just like fell into it. And this is like going on your fifth year of being in and out with Marine units, no wonder you felt so comfortable to like roll up on us.
Yeah, and, it was. Yeah. I think it worked out. I mean, it was.
Oh yeah.
It was awesome. It was a great introspective into Marines operating in that AO, in that war at that time. And, we didn't do a book on it, but there was some really good magazine articles for the Marine Corps Association, the Marine Corps Gazette, one of the best magazines ever, and then Leatherneck, another of the best magazines ever. Both of those published in articles about you guys. So, yeah, it was really, it just worked out. And then, everything has a lifespan, even a bristlecone pine, they last thousands of years. And, the lifespan of my time embedding with Marine Corps units in combat, that was it. That came to a close. So I think what happens sometimes, people don't, well, I don't want to talk about other people, but I think for me, recognizing when things are coming to an end, that there's, let's move on. Done this, enough, is you want to recognize that, and then, and then, move on to the next thing. I still work with the Marine Corps, different things, but it's been, it's the last combat was with you guys, so 15 years ago.
Yeah, I just remember looking at the articles you've written. I went and reread one like last year, for like the first time in like 14 years. I was like, man, this, like, so much stuff I forgot about, and like so much stuff that we don't really have perspective as, just like, because we're like 19 and 20. The squad leader's 22. The guy running the patrol base is our lieutenant. He's 24. He's the oldest guy we got, and like, this is the only thing I've ever done. I've gone to high school and I've done this. So like, I don't know. And then like reading, like just the articles about like living obscure, like not showering, using one of the mirrors came off a vehicle that had been blown off. Like, oh, that is kind of interesting. But at the time, you're just like, that's the only thing we've done. Or for me, it's like, this is the only thing I've done. I've done this in summer camp. So, yeah, no, it's pretty awesome that you're able to like capture all that history. And this is obviously a history channel, but this is all tied into history. And you've written history books, so it's pretty awesome to see how reporters come in and fill in for history books. So, yeah.
Well, it's just, it was the right elements in the Marine Corps, and then me as an element at the right time in the right places. And, like, okay, yeah, I'm going to do this. Right. You guys are doing your job no matter what. And they make you guys, the Marine Corps makes the opportunity, they avail it. and I take it, and I did. So I don't. But the thing is, they don't make those. They don't. Those opportunities are pretty rare, and they just sort of evolve. Like, the 2-3 never would have said, "Oh, we're going to send this guy out to Camp Blessing." Had I not been with them, like, I could have been, 300 pounds. I'm like emailing, "Hey, I'd like to be with the Marines out in combat. Hey, wait up, everybody." But I mean, it's. I was with them during their training, and then I was, I spent that amazing summer up in the Sierra Nevada, with the Mountain Leader course, and then out into Afghanistan. And, when you can carry your own weight and not be a sissy, and with the Marine Corps, and, just not be a problem to anybody, not complain. Oh, I need a helicopter, get me out of here. None of that crap. And just go with the flow. And, basically it's like the stoic, stoicism, the stoic embed, don't be the complainer. Just go with the flow, go with everything. And, yep, I have that picture. There's Lieutenant, oh my God.
Rockway.
Rockway, yep. And that's right there. Was it Typhoon 3 or 4? I can't remember.
So that's Typhoon 5. And I
5.
love that I have this picture. That's me taking it of you. So we have our swap photos.
Right.
Do you still have your cameras? I have I'm looking at my camera. It's over there in the corner.
Yeah, those died. Those are old. Got those that Canon 1DS Mark III. I used it up. So yeah, those are. Actually, I may still have that one. I had 2 of them, but I got
you could
those.
Donate if you ever wanted to donate that to like a Marine museum or a museum. I'm sure.
Oh, right.
That'd be kind of cool.
Yeah. Yeah. There's Lieutenant Rockaway. Wow, that was I remember that photograph. I remember you taking that. That was fun. But yeah, it's just, those, they talk about the stars aligning or whatever. I mean, everything just aligned just right. So in terms of being, the embed, but it was very different from, because a lot of people, there you are. Yep. That's my picture of you. That was awesome. What a great day. And you just have to be willing to go for it, and then be a stoic about it, because you never know what's going to happen. I mean, I had no idea I was going to Camp Blessing. I had no idea where I was going to be with you guys. I mean, you guys were sort of the Camp Blessing of Marja area. I mean, you remember the one outpost? It was a hole up on the top of a hill with a tarp and a they had it was like a fire team. So there was 4 Marines and they dug a hole, or they dug 4 holes, and they had some MREs, and you guys and then they would go out and resupply them. I mean, and that was their combat outpost. They didn't have sandbags. They had holes, fighting positions, and, like a saw. And, so anyway, yep. So have I covered everything?
No, you did. And this is what this is how Plaku looked at the end.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was just these 4. It was originally it was like a vehicle in a hole, and then by the end of the deployment, I think I'll kind of close with that because you're talking about I'll tell my little piece because you're talking about the end of, and that made you being shot at that intersection. Like my last week, I got dysentery, so I didn't go with them. I didn't go with my squad they did some operation. I was sick. They took an extra machine gunner. They didn't need a radio operator. So I went up here, and I was going home in 4 nights, and I'm standing on top of that outpost, and we're flashing. There's this little village nearby, and we're hanging out and flashing a flashlight, and somebody in the village is flashing a flashlight. And so we're all bored. So we're flashing. We're like, what's this? And it's a stream of yellow Chinese tracers.
Oh, wow.
Right at that little outpost on the left. And we were just so mind blown because we hadn't been. Yeah, it'd been like a month. It'd been like there. It got so quiet at the end of deployment. But that was
Yeah.
like literally the complacency kills sort of thing. It's like we go home like the day after tomorrow, and we're up here, no gear, no guns. We didn't have anything. We were just, and I think that's one of the things that everyone, well, not everyone, but something I like. Like you hear these stories like, well, how can people get so complacent? It's like, well, you're living there for like 6 months. Try to live 6 months always on
Oh,
edge. Like you're gonna make a mistake, and you should try. That's why you have leadership, senior guys. We didn't have many senior guys at that post who would have ripped us apart. We thought we were the cool guys because we were basically running it. Lance Corporal Schmuckatelli's up there, but yeah, no, it was. I think that's kind of a pretty fitting way to end, Ed. But if you want to, I don't know. I think you've done a good job of saying your greatest takeaways. But if you want anything, any saved rounds or what else you working on? And you said you started working on. You wrote your first fiction book.
yeah, that's coming out soon, and well, within the, probably in the fall. But the project I'm working on right now, finishing up, is Operation Red Wings, the deep story about how it evolved from the special operations and Navy SEAL side. I'm almost done with that. So, but yeah, that's going to be out here soon, and then in audio in the fall. So, I can talk about, maybe we can, if you want to do another one or one of these or something like that, get more into the specifics with that. But because I think that's, initially we are going to talk about that. But this is what a great photograph that is. Was that during a Haboob dust storm?
Yeah, uh, I have some good ones of. I wish my pictures would upload. Yeah, this was yeah, it was like a dust storm, and then one of the squads came up, so I have them coming through the sand.
But
Um,
you're talking about the complacency kills. I mean, here we are talking for the first time since you were yelling at me, up at that, and it was like, I was just like so comfortable. Nothing's going to happen to me. I don't need, because I hated wearing that stuff. I mean, it compresses you and the helmet. But you cannot, it's true. Complacency kills. I just want to stay alert, stay alive. And that's just, it's hard to do that 24/7, you know? So that's another great shot. Look at that. I think I know exactly where that is. I can't describe it, but I've been right along that area there with you.
yeah, because this is on the edge, because it turned and it went from that green zone into the deserts,
Mhm.
and then the deserts with all the IEDs that we left alone. That we were, yeah, we're not going to go look for IEDs out in the desert. I remember,
Nope.
but let's see if then no, it's just life experience. It's interesting, and that's that little village. I think this was like the next day, or maybe this was the day before. We
Yeah.
spent the next like 2 days, like hoping to God these people would give us an excuse, and they never did. They're like, nope, we took our shot. We're not
Right.
gonna, yeah.
Yeah.
But
They know they have good intel, they got binoculars. So they
well,
know what's going on. So
I'll get you those pictures, and yeah, thanks for so much for coming on.
this was
I'll
awesome. I thank you very much. Yeah, I loved, I did a lot of yakking, a lot of talking, and it'd be nice to hear a little bit more from you.
Oh no, I love this because on my end, as the content creator, I don't have to do anything. So it's nice to relax. Otherwise, I'm editing other stuff. But all right, thanks guys so much for watching. If you have any comments, leave them in below, and we'll come back if you want to, and we'll do another one, and we'll touch back on any questions we miss. But we'll end the stream, and we'll just be backstage.